Greetings everyone, I'm Stefan, and today we'll be covering all the Ascension Perks in Stellaris 3.0 and ranking them based on their power levels. As you can see on screen, we have a nice Ascension Perk tier list on our hands, and I have very good reasons for all the rankings, so stay tuned, and we'll be getting to why Psionic Ascension is actually not as bad as you might think. So let's begin with F tier. The first perk that we're going to be talking about actually really surprised me. I always thought Transcendent Learning was good because you got a lot more leader levels and leader experience, but in reality it doesn't translate into many levels at all. I did a couple tests where I ran the game from year 1 to year 50, and Transcendent Learning only actually gave us half of a level of advantage over an empire that did not use Transcendent Learning. The reason for that is because every time you level up a leader, they require far more experience to level up again. For example, going from level 1 to level 2 requires 200 experience, but going from level 2 to level 3 requires 475, more than double. This trend continues and makes it very difficult to level up leaders to a very high level. For that reason, the extra leader level cap it gives is really not that useful. If you're playing as an organic empire, your pops will simply die before they reach a point where they can take advantage of extra leader levels. The only situation where Transcendent Learning might be decent is with a machine empire, because you might eventually get more benefit out of this perk than any other empire. Normally though, all it gives is 1% to some of your output, and 1% is simply not enough to rank it any higher than F tier. Next, we have Enigmatic Engineering, and this is where I have to point out that this tier list is primarily meant for single player. In multiplayer, Enigmatic Engineering can be situationally good, because it will prevent your opponents from stealing technology, doing spying operations, or reverse engineering your debris, but in single player, AI doesn't really do this. And even if it did do it and actually conducted any operations on you, those operations are quite weak, and so as of 3.0.3, this does not really do much. Moving up to C tier, we get into some decent Ascension perks, such as for example, Consecrated Worlds. This perk allows you to consecrate uninhabited planets for a decent bonus across your empire. The bonus depends on what sort of planet you consecrate. For example, consecrating a regular planet will give you only a moderate bonus to Unity, Amenities, and Spiritualist Ethics attraction, but consecrating a Gaia world, especially if it's a holy world, is going to give you a whole lot more. Overall, you can only consecrate 3 planets across your empire for a relatively decent Unity, Amenities, and Ethics attraction bonus. Funnily enough, while the planets do have to be uninhabited when you consecrate them, you can later go on and colonize them. This might be unintended, but even with this, this perk is not really all that good. Next up, we have Interstellar Dominion. This one gives you a 20% discount on Starbase influence cost, as well as 20% on claim influence cost. The only problem with it is that influence cost is really not all that big of a problem most of the time. If you're expanding early on, you'll be doing most of your expansion before you're able to even get this Ascension perk, and when you're expanding into other empires in the mid-game, you're probably going to have plenty of influence to do it. There's not really many things to spend influence on except, war and habitats, and if you're not building habitats and just doing war, you're going to have plenty to expand at a pretty reasonable pace. Next up on the tier list, we have Eternal Vigilance. This gives you plus 25% to Starbase damage and hull points, as well as giving you more defensive platforms and higher damage from your defensive platforms. These bonuses are quite solid, and if you're relying on your stations to defend you in the early game, this perk might be quite useful. The only downside to it is that late game, it becomes borderline irrelevant. The thing is, once stuff like neutron launchers and hangar bays are in play, stations can't really put up a fight against the fleet, and so can be destroyed relatively quickly in the late game. However, mid-game is quite decent, and it is actually possible to reduce your defensive platform cost down by about 80-something%. That's because any discounts to defensive platforms also stack with any discounts on ship cost, and so spamming out a bunch of very cheap and very effective defensive platforms can be a good way to go. Next up, we have Imperial Prerogative. This gives you plus 20% to admin capacity, which is a solid bonus, but it really isn't all that much of a bonus. Giving you plus 20% to admin cap can free up maybe a couple of your bureaucrats, and they can go work some other jobs, but that's about the extent of the impact of this perk. It really is quite boring and quite bad. Next up, we have Shared Destiny. This one gives you +2 available envoys and reduces your subject integration cost by 50%. This does not actually reduce the monthly cost of integration, but instead it just makes it twice as fast. So it is quite a decent perk to take, and as long as you have subjects, this can really help you integrate them faster and really make use of their empires. Otherwise, getting +2 available envoys is quite decent for doing any diplomacy with other aliens, or increasing your diplo weight in the galactic community. Next up, we have a Galactic Contender. This gives you +20% diplomatic weight, which is relatively alright. Gives you more influence in the community, and if you're playing multiplayer, this can be relevant. Single player though, it's more or less meh, because the AI will just do whatever the AI wants to do. The extra damage to Fallen Empires, Awakened Empires, and Gate Builders is quite decent and can be useful if you're in a situation where you are fighting them. However, generally you will be able to fight them on your own terms, and so getting +33% damage to an encounter you will only face once is not particularly good. Moving up to B tier, we have a Megacorp exclusive, Universal Transactions. This one gives you a 15% discount on branch offices and makes it so that commercial packs are free to maintain. Because as a Megacorp you will probably have a lot of branch offices and a lot of commercial packs, getting a discount on those is very solid and allows you to expand and build even more branch offices, which in turn help your empire significantly. Next up, we have Mastery of Nature. This has two benefits. First, it reduces clear blocker cost by 33%, which is relatively minor, but it does help in the mid-game where you have a lot of blockers to clear. The other benefit is the primary one, and it's the Mastery of Nature decision. This decision can be enacted on all of your planets, and while it is quite expensive at 2000 energy and 100 influence, it will give you +2 districts on your planets. In 3.0, getting extra districts is quite nice. This will significantly help you out with pop growth, because of course extra districts contribute to planet capacity, and extra planet capacity allows you to grow more population faster. As of 3.0.3, getting extra jobs is also not that easy, and so being able to plop down 2 extra districts for either 2 extra building slots or 2 production districts is quite solid and can really help you out. I would not recommend using this Ascension Perk early on, but in the mid-game to late game, expanding your planets can really benefit you. Next up, we have One Vision. This perk will give you 3 bonuses, +10% to monthly unity, which can help you with finishing traditions slightly faster, -10% to pop amenities usage, which can help you with employing less amenities jobs on your planets and having more normal jobs instead, and +50% to governing ethics attraction. I was actually surprised how good the governing ethics attraction was after doing some tests. I had an empire with Justice Capital, 2 colonies, and another enemy capital captured really early on, and after doing a test with One Vision and a test without One Vision, I came to the conclusion that the empire with One Vision actually had about 5 more stability across all its planets, because the pops were simply more attracted to the happier factions, and overall the happiness from being in those factions translated into stability and overall increased production. Next up, we have Voidborn. This gives you +20% to habitat habitability. Remember, habitats have a base of 80% habitability, and so this would bring it to 100. However, this bonus is not that significant because there are already techs in the tech tree that increase habitability by a grand total of 20%. So overall, the extra habitability in habitats can safely be ignored. The big thing about this is that you get 2 additional building slots across all your habitats. Those additional building slots can be used for basically anything you want, and as long as you spam a bunch of habitats, getting those building slots will really help you out with getting more production across your empire. And if you don't want to put up any production on those, you can at the very least put up some residences so that they have more planet capacity, and so pops grow faster on those habitats. How good Voidborn is really does depend on how many habitats you have and how much benefit you can get from those extra building slots. So for example, if you're playing Void Dwellers, this will probably actually be an S tier. And if you're playing with an empire with absolutely no habitats, well, congratulations. Taking this will give you absolutely nothing. Next up, we have Grasp of the Void. This gives you +5 to starbase capacity, which seems really boring and relatively weak until you consider how powerful starbases really can be in 3.0. Getting 5 more starbases with anchorages on them can give you up to 180 naval cap, which is quite solid. As a Machine Empire or Hive Mind, you also get access to solar panels. So you can actually use those extra stations to just have solar panels and hydroponics on them, or a very solid chunk of resources getting produced from them. Next up, we have World Shaper. With this perk, you can terraform planets to Gaia worlds using 5,500 energy and 10 years of terraforming, although this can be increased via the Terraforming Gases Edict. On a Gaia, you get plus 10% to resources from jobs, as well as plus 10% to happiness on your organic pops. As a side bonus, any open districts on a Gaia are worth 50% more than open districts on a normal planet when it comes to planetary capacity. And of course, we can't forget about the 100% habitability for all species. Next up, we have Synthetic Age. This is an exclusive for Machine Empires, and it gives you plus 2 machine modification points, as well as a reduction to Modify Species special projects. Honestly, this Ascension perk is not all that good. 2 machine modification points is good and all, but considering how you have a limited amount of trait picks, you will usually have to take off some negative trait point for either 1 or 2 points, which is the entire thing that you're going to get from Synthetic Age, and in the end, you're going to be able to, I don't know, take off Solitary and put on minus 10% to robot upkeep. It's really not all that great, although the reduced species modification cost can come in handy. Next, we have Galactic Force Projection. This perk will give you plus 80 naval capacity and 20 to fleet command limit. These numbers really aren't all that big, although you do have to keep in mind that they are going to be modified by any modifiers that you have, so that 80 naval capacity can easily be 120 or something else, depending on your bonuses. Compared to Grasp of the Void, Galactic Force Projection does not give you a whole lot of naval capacity, but it is very nice that it is instant, and so for example, if you're building up a massive fleet and are going over naval cap, you can very easily and very quickly fix that by just going with that Ascension perk. Moving up to the A tier, we have Nihilistic Acquisition. Now, this is one of those perks that if you don't use the power of, it is completely useless, but if you do, you can get some pretty serious benefits. For example, right here we are playing as a pacifist empire. We can't claim territory, but we can take other people's pops by just bombarding their planets with Nihilistic Acquisition. Overall, it only takes about a couple of years to be able to abduct a large world and resettle it across all your normal planets. A side effect of stealing the pops rather than conquering them directly is that once you capture them, they don't actually get any malices, and so they can work just fine in your empire, and the only issue you might have is they might be a little bit unhappy due to their faction being at low approval. But if the pops that you capture have the same mindset as you, you'll be able to just completely seamlessly integrate them on your planets and do it relatively quickly with Nihilistic Acquisition without having to bother with invading an empire, having all the claims, and taking all that space. Next up, we have Xeno Compatibility, aka the Heresy Ascension perk. It gives you plus 33% to immigration pull, which is quite decent when it comes to migration pacts with other empires, and once you can get some Xeno pops in your empire, on the pops where you have 2 or more different species, you'll be getting a very solid 20% bonus to pop growth. Xeno Compatibility actually also allows you to crossbreed species and make special super species using different Xeno pops. As you can see, over time you will get half species. These half species actually have the unique privilege of having plus 1 extra trait point pick and 1 extra trait point. As long as you can manage your half species and give them the proper traits via bioengineering, those pops should be actually better than your normal pops, and you'll be able to get a decent chunk of benefit from that. Combining Xeno Compatibility with the Bio Ascension will allow you to get a lot more benefit out of it, and so if you're going Xeno Compatibility, you probably will want to go for Bio Ascension. Next up on the tier list, we have Master Builders, a pretty decent Ascension perk as long as you are building megastructures. This will give you a nice 50% to megastructure build speed and plus 1 to megastructure build capacity. You could potentially combine that with the Ambition Architectural Renaissance for a grand total of 3 megastructure build capacity, so you'll be able to build or upgrade 3 megastructures at the same time and do it quite quickly. Of course, if you're not planning on building or upgrading any megastructures, Master Builders is completely pointless, but if you are, it is quite solid. Moving on, we have Engineered Evolution. Engineered Evolution will give you extra gene modification points, a discount on modifying your species, and clone vats. Soldiers are also nice, but are honestly the least significant impact of bioengineering. Anyways, with those traits and any trait points that you have from technologies, you'll be able to modify your species. The only problem is, you probably won't be able to do much to your species because if you have min-maxed it, you'll probably be running something like Unruly and Solitary, negative traits that don't really impact your species all that much, and if you have 3 positive traits, you'll only be able to really put on 1 2-trait point one or 2 1-trait point one, which overall are not going to impact your empire all that much. This is why I would usually hold off on modifying my species until I get to the Evolutionary Mastery, which is generally going to be the next perk I pick after Engineered Evolution, and then I could go all out on modifying my species. For now though, the biggest perk of having Engineered Evolution are the clone vats. Sadly, the clone vats have been nerfed from 2.8, and I say nerfed in the sense that for an organic empire, they're nerfed. For a hive mind, yeah, they're better, but for a normal empire, they really are quite terrible. The reason why I would consider clone vats bad for a normal empire is because, as a normal empire, you'll have access to robots. Clone vats are incompatible with robot assembly plants when it comes to pop assembly, and overall, robot assembly plants are a bit more efficient when it comes to pops sustaining them than clone vats. The thing with clone vats to remember is that they require a whole lot of food to upkeep, 30 food per month, and so you'll require about 2 to 3 pops working farmer jobs to be able to upkeep a single clone vat. To upkeep a single robot assembly plant, you'll need about 1.5 pops, 1 pop to work the actual roboticist job, and about half a pop to upkeep the roboticist with alloys. All in all, if you're building clone vats instead of robot assembly plants, you're trading about 1 pop in exchange for 0.7 growth, which is not all that efficient, but is relatively passable on new planets. On older planets where you already have robot assembly plants, replacing them with clone vats is really not worth it in my opinion. Not only are clone vats very expensive, but you will also seriously disrupt your economy as your roboticist jobs are now unemployed, and suddenly you have to get a lot of farmers to upkeep the clone vats. On top of all of that, clone vats lose out to robot assembly because robots are just better than organic pops in most cases. Robots require half as much housing needs and half as much amenities usage as any normal pop, and also can be easily modified really early on to be specialized towards a particular need. On top of that, they also have perfect habitability everywhere. The only area where robots lose out to normal pops is that normal pops can auto-migrate and robots cannot. But resetting robot pops is also cheaper because it does not require influence. Although of course if you have slaves, they don't require influence either. All in all, this makes Engineered Evolution relatively average. However, it becomes quite good when you combine it with Evolutionary Mastery. So let's take a look at that. Evolutionary Mastery will give you just as many gene modification points and just as much of a discount on modifying your species as Engineered Evolution. However, we will also unlock a technology that allows us to have advanced traits and resequence our species to actually remove any positive traits. With this technology, you can really make your species quite good, and with the special traits that you get from it, you're also going to be getting unique bonuses. For example, Robust is one of the special traits unlocked, and it gives you 30% habitability, 5% resources, and 50 liter lifespan for the cost of 4 points. I would highly recommend this if you are lazy, but if you're not lazy and can actually gene mod all of your species to have specific planet preference, the habitability aspect of this really falls off, and it's not all that good otherwise. Erudite, however, is good no matter how you spin it. This will increase your researcher output and also give your species special traits. If we take a look at our scientists, they have plus 5% to research speed. If we take a look at a ruler, we have 5% research speed. Taking a look at our governor, we have 5% research speed. Well, it's 5% output, but it's also modifying researchers. And if we take a look at an admiral, we're going to be getting plus 5% to ship fire rate and plus 10% to combat disengagement. We also get a similar thing on our generals, although honestly generals don't really matter. With all these bonuses, we can get a very solid research boost of about 40%, which is actually better than what Synthetic Ascension could do. However, we can't really do much of anything else. We can have specialized species. For example, we can have a species producing extra energy, a species producing extra minerals, but all in all, you're going to be doing a lot of micro in exchange for a 15% bonus. Usually, I don't have time to micromanage all my species, and so I generally just have Ingenious or some other good trait, my main species, and just have that template across everyone. Bio Ascension does become quite interesting if you have livestock or any slave pops. You can easily apply nerf stapled so that they produce extra resources and are not affected by happiness, and delicious for extra food from livestock. Having a livestock species can really make it a lot easier to run all those clone vats, in case you want to go for them instead of robots. But anyways, this does it for the Bio Ascension, and now let's take a look at another Ascension path, the Psionic Ascension. When you choose Mind over Matter, your species will get access to the latent Psionic trait, which gives you extra science and energy output, and you will have a chance to roll leaders with the Psychic trait as well. And as you can see here, having Psychic on your scientist can really help you out. Otherwise, with Psionic Ascension, you will have access to a building called the Psi Core. The Psi Core will give 2 telepath jobs, which are basically better enforcers, and will also increase stability on the planet by 5. You don't even need to have Pops working the psionic jobs. The building itself will increase stability and therefore increase production. And just like with Bio Ascension, you will have access to special armies, which are a bit better than normal ones. The real goodies of the Psionic Ascension come with Transcendence. This will give you a lot of bonuses to espionage, so if you're playing a spy empire, Transcendence is probably the way to go. And otherwise, will give you quite a bit of bonuses as well. First and foremost, all of your leaders will now gain the Psychic trait. On your ruler, that's going to amount to 0.5 extra influence and 10% governing ethics attraction. On our scientists, as you have already seen, we get 10% extra research speed, and on our governor, we get an extra 5 stability and extra unity from jobs. Military leaders also become quite good. As you can see, our admirals are going to get plus 10% to ship weapons damage and 50% evasion, and our generals are going to get extra morale. Yay! On top of that, our species is also going to get extra production with increased happiness, energy, and science output. With all these bonuses, we're not quite on par with Bio Ascension, although we are very close. And by the way, while the Psionic trait is only applied to your primary species, you can apply it to other species after that by going with Assimilation. Assimilating Pops is relatively expensive and can take a while, so you can always just click the Apply Template button and do a special project to just apply the trait manually. Anyways, now we get to the fun part of Psi Ascension, and that is the Shroud. First, we're going to have to do a special project to breach into the Shroud, which is going to take 20,000 society research, but once we do, we can gamble. And really, the Shroud is just a gambling device. We reach out, we pay up, and then hopefully we can get some goodies out of it. For example, ethics attraction. Or not. Actually, we're not going to get ethics attraction because we're going to fail. If the Shroud likes you, you will get a lot of bonuses. If it doesn't, you won't. You can get some pretty serious bonuses from the Shroud, especially when it comes to technologies. For example, we can get a Psi jump drive, which has a lot more jump range than a normal jump drive. We can get a preconditioned interface, which is a combat computer that is basically like any normal combat computer, but has far more tracking. And we have access to the best shields in the game. As you can see here, Hyper Shields have 145 hit points, Dark Matter Deflectors have 185, but do require you to kill a Fallen Empire for them, and Psionic Shields have 240 hit points. That is quite a lot, and so going for these special technologies can really help you out and can make your ships quite a bit stronger than they normally would be. On top of that, you will also have access to Covenants. Covenants are basically pacts with Shroud entities that could give you some pretty serious bonuses. Overall, these Covenants are quite strong, and if you get really lucky, you can even get the end of the cycle, which is going to give you 100% to resources from jobs in orbital stations, 100% naval cap, 5 monthly influence, a lot of starbase capacity, but in exchange your empire just kind of dies after 50 years. That's the end of the cycle, and honestly, it's the most fun thing in the game. Overall, gambling in the Shroud and getting all those bonuses across your population make for a pretty good Ascension path, especially compared to the now nerfed Engineered Evolution. However, it is still quite weak compared to Synthetic Evolution, and we'll actually jump up a tier to cover that very quickly. Synthetic Evolution, just like the other Ascensions, comes in 2 parts. The first part is going to give you reduced robot upkeep and increased assembly speed, and will allow you to modify your species to be cyborgs. Cyborg Pops will get plus 20% habitability, plus 40 years of leader lifespan, and the leaders will also get special traits. Specifically, 5% minerals from jobs for the governor, 5% research speed for scientists, 5% ship fire rate for admirals, and 5% army damage for generals. Your ruler does not get any special bonuses, but he does live quite a bit longer. When it comes to the next step of synthetic evolution, there's another project to do, and this project will actually transform all of your cyborg pops into synthetics. And now this is where the tricky and fun part of synthetic evolution comes in. If you modify your species to all become robots, you actually won't have any normal organic pops growing, and that does reduce your pop growth speed overall. However, if you leave some of your pops as plain organics, such as for example by applying your default template to some of your population, those two pops will be spared from the Synth Ascension, and you will actually be able to grow your organic pops alongside your synthetic ones. But that trick is only for extra pop growth. Overall, you do want your species to become synthetic because you get some very, very serious bonuses. Specifically, 10% to robot output and +1 to robot modification points. You also have to consider that robots by default will get an extra 10% to output, and so compared to normal organic pops, you're already at 20% production extra in every single field. Once we do synthetically ascend, we'll be able to increase that even further. We can put on efficient processors on our pops for an extra 5% to resources from jobs. We can put on loyalty circuits for extra happiness, which translates into stability, and that translates into resources. And we can also put on high bandwidth for extra sprawl for pops in exchange for super conductive. This is how I generally like to run my robots, and this is a very, very effective way to do it. Once we get our species modified, we're going to be facing some pretty serious bonuses. First and foremost, our leaders. They're all going to be immortal and are going to get some pretty serious bonuses to what they're doing. For example, Governor gets +5% to energy and minerals. Scientist gets +5% to research and extra anomaly research speed. Admirals get 5% to ship fire rate and extra ship weapons range, which is very crucial in the late game, by the way. And generals will get extra army damage. Our normal pops are also going to get perfect habitability everywhere. And to put the cherry on top, we're also going to get some pretty serious pop growth across our empire. As long as we keep an organic species around, they will be growing, and they'll be growing at a pretty good rate. Of course, it does matter what tier capital you have, but generally, you're going to be getting some pretty serious growth from Synth Ascension, on top of having the most efficient pops possible. Another thing to note is that you are going to be getting a lot more base output out of your technicians, 8 per job rather than 6, and any specialization buildings are also going to give you more districts in their specialization. Overall, I hope you guys can see just how powerful Synth Ascension is when compared to the other two. But now, let's go back to A tier and cover the other perks there. For example, let's take a look at the Archaeology project. This perk will allow you to turn some of your planets into Ecomonopoli. All you have to do is make sure all their districts are either city districts or industrial districts, and as long as there are no tile blockers on the planet, you'll be able to do the Archaeology project for 20,000 minerals and 200 influence. Once the project is complete, you're going to get all your housing districts and industrial districts converted into archaeologies, and you will have access to some very, very efficient districts when it comes to alloy output, consumer goods output, and Unity/amenities output. The Ecomonopolis itself will also have all its building slots automatically unlocked, and you will get +50% to pop growth speed on the planet. Additionally, 20% resources from jobs never hurt anyone. The thing to keep in mind with an archaeology project, though, is that you will not be able to just convert all of your planets into Ecomonopoli and have a direct upgrade. You cannot produce raw resources on these archaeologies, and instead you're going to have to rely on either buying resources or having other planets produce it for you. Also, keep in mind that if you have a relic world, you'll be able to restore it into Ecomonopolis anyways, and so if you do have a relic world in your space, you probably will not want to go for the Archaeology Project Ascension. Moving on, we have the Colossus Project. The Colossus itself is a planet cracker weapon that can easily destroy a planet no matter its fortification. It is very expensive, it takes a while to build, and is quite vulnerable. However, once you are done building the Colossus, you will have access to a very special casus belli in all the other empires for Total War. Total War will allow you to capture enemy space without any claims and make war very, very simple and very easy by just, allowing you to walk into enemy space and taking all their stuff. However, if your Colossus is destroyed, this casus belli will go away, so just try to keep it safe. Next up, we have Defender of the Galaxy. This will increase damage to any crisis, be it normal endgame crisis or player crisis, and also increase everyone's opinion by 20. The opinion increase is quite frankly irrelevant, but getting a solid 50% extra damage to crisis factions when they just kind of show up at your doorstep is very, very good. The reason why I ranked Defender of the Galaxy so high in the tier list is because if you are fighting Crisis, you probably definitely want to go for Defender of the Galaxy, no matter the cost. Otherwise, if you're not fighting Crisis and have no plans on doing so, it is honestly quite useless. 20 opinion isn't going to do basically anything to your relations, because all the thresholds require 200 opinion. But anyways, let's now move on to S tier and take a look at some of the best Ascension perks in the game. First one being Technological Ascendancy. Overall, research makes or breaks empires in Stellaris, and having 10% extra research is always very good. If you don't want to go for research or have already taken Technological Ascendancy, you can go for Executive Vigor instead. Honestly, this one might be slightly better as of the current version because it gives you +2 edict capacity, and the edicts introduced in 3.0, specifically mining, farming, and capacity subsidies, are quite broken. Being able to get +50% extra output on your technicians, miners, and farmers is extremely powerful, and so going for Executive Vigor can really help you out with your early economy. The only other sources of edict capacity are the Imperial Authority, Imperial Cult, and Inwards Perfection. Without those, you will be stuck at 1, and you will not have access to a lot of these unless you go over cap, in which case you are going to be suffering a pretty hefty admin cap penalty. Next up, we have Galactic Wonders. This perk will give you access to ring worlds, matter decompressors, and Dyson spheres. The only requirement for it is that you have completed or restored any other megastructure. In our case, we have made a Science Nexus, and now we're able to take Galactic Wonders. Funnily enough, they actually removed the 3 Ascension perk requirement for it, and so in theory, this can be taken as your first Ascension perk. As of the current version of the game, ring worlds aren't really all that worth it to build, but matter decompressors and Dyson spheres really are. A matter decompressor, for example, will produce 2,000 minerals that you can convert into alloys or anything else you want, and a Dyson sphere will produce 4,000 energy credits per month. They only cost about 50,000 alloys each, so if you can scrounge that together, these things are amazing. Next up on the tier list, we have Hive Worlds, and of course, as the name implies, these are exclusive to hive minds. Terraforming into a hive world is quite expensive. It requires 10,000 energy and 20 years of terraforming, but once you do complete it, a hive world is going to be perfectly habitable for any hive mind, going to give extra resources from jobs, and give an extra spawning drone job, which is going to give you 2 organic pulp assembly. Otherwise, the planet will have all of its building slots unlocked, and you'll be able to build as many of a certain district as you want. The hive districts on a hive world are also going to be quite good, and will provide you insane amounts of housing. You can easily get massive amounts of planet capacity on these hive worlds, and so your growth is going to be off the charts. The fact that this planet type can easily be spammed across your empire, and considering how you can easily specialize them to be very, very good at producing one certain resource, makes it that going for hive worlds is a very good idea, and honestly, I would prioritize that above all else for a hive mind. You can easily increase empire power in the same way with a machine empire. Machine empires get a very similar type of world to hive minds, and it gives basically the same exact bonuses, except on machines you get minus 10% to pop housing usage. On a machine world, the reduced housing usage actually does make sense. Unlike normal empires, you're not affected by the growth curve, and so you really just want to have housing stay above 0. And now we move on to the final perk in the tier list. Become the Crisis. The Crisis Ascension perk should really be considered differently from any other Ascension perk. It's not a perk that's meant to be balanced, and so it's not a perk that can really compete against any other Ascension perk. When you actually make the choice to go into Crisis, you have 2 stages. The first stage is collecting metas and overall becoming a galactic nuisance. To gain metas, you have to do various naughty things, but honestly just consuming other empires is the most effective way to get metas. Once you do build up metas, you're going to be getting a lot of various bonuses to your ships, and you will unlock menacing cruisers, destroyers, and corvettes. These menacing ships have basically no upkeep and can be built for minerals. When it comes to destroying the galaxy, those things really help you out. And speaking of destroying the galaxy, you actually get special ships, specifically Star Eaters. At the final stage of metas, you'll have to go around and crack stars in exchange for dark matter, and using that dark matter, you'll be able to build up an atherophasic engine, which produces a whole lot of resources until it gets finished, at which point the galaxy just kind of blows up. There are a lot of things that go into this Ascension perk, and honestly, it deserves a video all on its own. For now though, I can direct you guys to a stream where I played as German simulators and basically sped run the Crisis to be able to blow up the galaxy in 2308. Hopefully you guys find that interesting, and I'll have the link in the top right corner and in the description. But anyways, that's gonna do it for the tier list. Make sure to like and subscribe. I haven't been telling you guys to subscribe, so go do that. I have more videos like this coming, and I'd like to give a special thank you to my Patreon supporters for making this sort of video possible. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.